The chandeliers of the Grand Monarch Hotel bathed the ballroom in a warm golden glow, reflecting off crystal glasses and polished marble floors. The annual Crystal Crown Charity Gala had become the most anticipated business event of the year, attracting billionaires, politicians, celebrities, and the country's most influential executives. Every conversation carried the promise of billion-dollar partnerships, and every handshake could reshape an entire industry. At precisely 7 o'clock, the grand doors swung open. Camera flashes exploded across the entrance. Ladies and gentlemen, Olivia Carter. The elegant CEO of Carter Innovations stepped inside wearing a breathtaking midnight blue designer gown. Diamonds shimmered around her neck, and confidence radiated from every step she took. Guests applauded as photographers competed for the perfect picture. Reporters whispered that tonight would mark the announcement of a historic merger, one expected to double the value of her company and secure her reputation as one of the youngest business legends in the country. Olivia acknowledged the crowd with a polished smile, but behind her calm expression, pressure weighed heavily on her mind. Weeks of negotiations had led to this single evening. Every investor, every board member, and every journalist was watching her. One mistake could become tomorrow's headline. Across the ballroom, dozens of waiters moved silently between the guests carrying silver trays filled with champagne and delicate appetizers. Among them was one man who attracted almost no attention. He appeared to be in his early 40s, dressed in a perfectly pressed black and white waiter uniform. His posture was calm, his movements precise, and his expression unreadable. While other servers hurried from table to table, he walked at an unhurried pace, quietly observing everything around him. He greeted every guest with the same respectful nod, never demanding attention and never lingering long enough to be remembered. No one asked his name. To everyone in the room, he was simply another waiter. As Olivia made her way toward the stage, several executives surrounded her, congratulating her on the upcoming merger. Their voices blended with the soft music playing from the orchestra while cameras continued following her every movement. At that same moment, the quiet waiter approached with a tray of champagne. A guest suddenly stepped backward without looking. The unexpected movement caused the waiter to shift his balance. The edge of the silver tray lightly brushed Olivia's arm. One champagne glass tipped. A few sparkling drops landed on the sleeve of her expensive gown. The ballroom seemed to freeze. The orchestra stopped playing. Conversations vanished into complete silence. Olivia stared at the tiny stain as disbelief quickly turned into anger. Months of stress, endless meetings, and the enormous pressure of the evening erupted in a single uncontrolled moment. Before anyone could speak, she spun toward the waiter. Her hand flew through the air. Smack! The sharp sound echoed across the silent ballroom. Several guests gasped. Others exchanged awkward glances. A few even chuckled quietly, believing the waiter had simply received the punishment he deserved. The waiter slowly turned his face back toward her. A faint red mark appeared on his cheek. Yet he showed no anger. No embarrassment. No attempt to defend himself. Instead, he lowered his head slightly and spoke in a calm, almost gentle voice. "I'm very sorry, ma'am." He carefully steadied the tray, straightened the glasses that remained, and prepared to continue serving the guests as though nothing had happened. His quiet dignity unsettled the room far more than any argument could have. Near the front of the ballroom, an elderly member of Carter Innovations' board suddenly dropped his champagne glass. It shattered against the marble floor. His face had turned completely pale. He wasn't looking at Olivia. He was staring at the waiter. His lips trembled as he whispered, almost to himself, "No, it can't be." One by one, several senior board members rose from their seats. Instead of rushing to comfort their CEO, they walked directly toward the silent waiter. The chairman removed his glasses, his hands visibly shaking. He looked from the waiter to Olivia, then back again. In a voice barely above a whisper, he asked the question that drained every trace of confidence from the room. "Olivia, do you have any idea who you just slapped?" The ballroom remained frozen. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Every pair of eyes followed the elderly chairman as he slowly approached the quiet waiter. The confidence that had filled the room only moments earlier had vanished, replaced by a heavy silence that made even the soft hum of the chandeliers seem deafening. Olivia frowned, forcing an uneasy laugh. "What is this?" she asked. "Some kind of joke?" No one answered. The waiter stood perfectly still, his silver tray balanced effortlessly in one hand. The faint red mark on his cheek remained, but his expression had not changed. His calm composure only made the tension in the room worse. The chairman stopped a few feet away from him. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the elderly man bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Brooks," he said respectfully. "Please accept my sincere apologies." A wave of confusion swept across the guests. Several executives exchanged puzzled looks. One whispered, "Did he just call a waiter Mr. Brooks?" Another shook his head. "This doesn't make any sense." Olivia stared at the chairman in disbelief. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "He's a waiter." The chairman slowly turned toward her. "No," he replied quietly. "Tonight he chose to dress as one." The words hit the room like thunder. The mysterious waiter finally lifted his eyes. For the first time that evening, he looked directly at Olivia. His gaze was calm, steady, and impossible to read. "My name," he said softly, "is Ethan Brooks." The name meant nothing to most of the guests. Reporters looked at one another, trying to remember where they had heard it before. But the members of Carter Innovations Board reacted instantly. Several of them went pale. One director nearly dropped the folder he had been carrying. Another quietly sat back down, unable to hide the shock on his face. Olivia noticed their reactions. Her confidence began to crack. "Who is he?" she asked. The chairman inhaled slowly before answering. 5 years ago, Carter Innovations was 6 weeks away from bankruptcy. The ballroom grew even quieter. Our lenders had walked away. Investors refused to help us. We were preparing to shut down operations. Olivia remained silent. She had joined the company after its recovery and knew only fragments of that difficult period. The chairman continued. Then an anonymous investor purchased nearly 38% of the company. He asked for no interviews. No photographs. No public recognition. He simply believed the company deserved another chance. The chairman looked back at Ethan. Without him, none of us would be standing here tonight. A murmur spread across the ballroom. Journalists hurriedly searched their phones. Business leaders whispered among themselves. The name Ethan Brooks suddenly sounded familiar. One reporter gasped. "Brooks Capital." Another nodded. "The private investment firm that owns stakes in dozens of Fortune 500 companies." Someone else added quietly. "They've invested billions without ever revealing their founder." Every eye returned to the quiet man in the waiter uniform. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. "This isn't possible," she whispered. The chairman reached inside his leather portfolio and removed a confidential shareholder report. Without saying a word, he handed it to her. Her fingers trembled as she opened the document. At the very top of the ownership list was a single name. Ethan Brooks. Below it was the percentage of ownership. 38.2%. Largest individual shareholder. Her face lost its color. The room suddenly felt smaller. She looked up at the man she had slapped only minutes earlier. The simple uniform no longer hid who he truly was. He wasn't one of the staff. He wasn't an ordinary investor. He was the very person who had saved Carter Innovations from disappearing years ago. Without his investment, Olivia would never have become CEO. Without his faith, there would have been no company to lead. Yet one question still haunted everyone in the ballroom. Why would a billionaire choose to spend the evening serving champagne instead of sitting at the head table reserved for honored guests? As if sensing the question in every mind, Ethan carefully placed the silver tray onto a nearby table. He adjusted the cuffs of his waiter jacket and looked around the silent ballroom. Then, in the same calm voice he had used all evening, he finally spoke. "I didn't come here tonight to be served." He paused. "I came to see who you become when you believe no one important is watching." A chill swept through the room. Every executive suddenly realized the evening had never been a charity gala. It had been a test. And many of them had already failed. No one moved. The ballroom, once alive with laughter and clinking glasses, had become so silent that the ticking of the antique grandfather clock near the stage seemed impossibly loud. Ethan Brooks stood calmly beside the serving table, his waiter jacket still neatly buttoned, his expression unreadable. Around him, billionaires, CEOs, and politicians watched in stunned silence, waiting for him to explain why one of the country's wealthiest investors had spent the entire evening pretending to be invisible. Olivia Carter tightened her grip on the shareholder report. Her hands trembled. "You planned this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded once. "Yes." The single word echoed through the room. "I've attended many galas over the years," he continued. "People always behave differently when they believe they're standing beside someone powerful. They're polite, generous, and respectful." He paused, letting his eyes wander across the faces of the executives. "But real character isn't revealed when you're speaking to a billionaire." His gaze settled on Olivia. "It's revealed when you're speaking to someone you believe can't change your future." The word struck harder than any accusation. Several executives lowered their heads in embarrassment. Some remembered snapping at waiters. Others remembered ignoring cleaners or speaking rudely to hotel staff earlier that evening. For the first time, they realized they hadn't been serving themselves dinner. They had been taking an exam. Ethan slowly reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small leather notebook. "I arrived 3 hours before the guests," he said. "I greeted every employee. I thanked every chef. I carried trays with the catering team. I watched how people treated those they believed were beneath them." He opened the notebook. There were many acts of kindness. A few relieved smiles appeared. But there were far more acts of disrespect. He read several brief observations aloud. One executive insulted a bartender for serving sparkling water instead of still. Another guest refused to speak directly to a cleaner and snapped his fingers instead. A senior manager publicly blamed a young waitress for his own mistake. Each sentence made another executive shift uncomfortably. Then Ethan closed the notebook. "But none of those moments disappointed me as much as what happened 5 minutes ago." Every eye turned toward Olivia. She felt hundreds of silent judgments pressing against her. She stepped forward, struggling to keep her composure. "Mr. Brooks. I made a terrible mistake. I've been under enormous pressure. The merger. The media. I lost control for a moment. I'm truly sorry." For a long moment, Ethan simply looked at her. Then he asked quietly. "If I had been only a waiter, would you still be apologizing?" The question pierced the room. Olivia opened her mouth. No words came. She wanted to say yes. She wanted everyone to believe it. But deep inside, she knew the answer. Her silence became her confession. Ethan nodded sadly. "I thought so." He reached into a slim leather briefcase resting beside the table and removed a thick envelope sealed with the Carter Innovations logo. The chairman immediately recognized it. His eyes widened. "Is that?" Ethan nodded. "It is." He held the envelope high enough for everyone to see. "This contains the agreement for a new investment." A murmur spread through the crowd. "It authorizes Brooks Capital to invest $2 billion into Carter Innovations." The ballroom erupted with gasps. $2 billion. The announcement had been planned as the grand finale of the gala, a surprise that would send the company's stock soaring and secure its future for decades. Journalists frantically raised their cameras. Board members stared in disbelief. Olivia felt hope return for a brief, fragile moment. Perhaps there was still a chance. Perhaps her apology had come in time. Ethan looked down at the signed agreement. I believed this company deserved another opportunity to change the world. He glanced around the room one last time. But companies don't build cultures. People do. And leadership always begins at the top. Without another word, he placed one hand on each side of the contract. Then. Ryup. The sound of tearing paper echoed through the silent ballroom. He calmly tore the agreement in half. Then into quarters. Then into dozens of small pieces. The shredded papers drifted slowly onto the polished marble floor like falling snow. No one dared to speak. $2 billion. Gone in less than 10 seconds. Olivia stood frozen, tears forming in her eyes as she watched the last pieces of the contract fall. She had lost far more than an investment. She had lost the trust of the one man who had believed in her company before anyone else ever did. And deep down, she knew the consequences of that single slap were only beginning. By sunrise, the world knew. The video from the Crystal Crown Gala had spread across every major news platform overnight. Millions of people watched the same few seconds again and again. A powerful CEO. A quiet waiter. A single slap. And the shocking truth that the man standing in a simple uniform was the billionaire investor who had saved her company years earlier. The headlines were everywhere. CEO humiliates waiter, only to discover he owned her company. Billionaire investor reveals hidden test after public humiliation. Carter Innovations faces crisis after Gala scandal. For Olivia Carter, the world that once admired her had completely changed. The same reporters who once praised her leadership were now questioning her character. The same investors who once competed to work with her were now demanding answers. But the worst damage wasn't coming from the media. It was coming from inside her own company. By Monday morning, employees began sharing stories that had been hidden for years. A former assistant revealed how Olivia once fired an employee for making a small mistake in front of the entire department. A receptionist explained how executives were trained to avoid wasting the CEO's time with ordinary employee concerns. A young employee admitted that many workers were afraid to speak honestly because they believed their opinions didn't matter. The slap had opened a door. And behind that door was a culture of fear. At Carter Innovations headquarters, the emergency board meeting began at 8 in the morning. Olivia sat at the end of the conference table, surrounded by people who once celebrated her achievements. The same executives who had praised her confidence and ambition now avoided eye contact. The chairman placed a folder on the table. Inside were investor withdrawals, employee complaints, and public relations reports. Olivia, he said quietly, this is no longer about what happened at the gala. She looked up. What does that mean? It means the gala only revealed what was already happening. The room went silent. For years, Olivia had believed success came from being demanding. She believed pressure created excellence. She believed people respected strength. But now she was seeing the difference between fear and respect. One created silence. The other created loyalty. After hours of discussion, the board reached its decision. The vote was unanimous. Olivia Carter was removed as CEO of Carter Innovations. The woman who had built her reputation as an unstoppable business leader walked out of the headquarters carrying a single box. No cameras. No applause. No crowd cheering her name. Only silence. As she passed through the lobby, she noticed something she had never paid attention to before. The security guard who opened the door every morning. The cleaning staff who arrived before sunrise. The employees who worked late nights to keep the company running. The people who had always been invisible to her. For the first time, she saw them. Outside the building, Olivia expected to see Ethan celebrating her downfall. But he wasn't there. Instead, she discovered something unexpected. A company employee sent her a message showing Ethan's actions after the board meeting. He had visited every department. He thanked the janitorial team personally. He shook hands with assistants. He apologized to employees who had felt ignored. He didn't speak like a billionaire. He spoke like someone who remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. That was when Olivia finally understood the difference between herself and Ethan Brooks. She had spent years trying to become important enough for people to notice her. Ethan had become powerful enough to make sure others were noticed. Weeks passed. Olivia disappeared from public life. She expected revenge. She expected Ethan to destroy her career completely. But instead, one afternoon, a simple envelope arrived at her home. No company logo. No legal documents. No threats. Just a handwritten letter. The name on the bottom made her heart stop. Ethan Brooks. She slowly opened it. And the first sentence changed everything. Olivia, I don't believe people are defined by their worst moment. But I do believe they must face it. She continued reading. And what Ethan offered her next was something she never expected. Not punishment. Not revenge. A second chance. Olivia read Ethan Brooks' letter 3 times before she fully understood what she was holding. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a message designed to humiliate her. It was an opportunity. At the bottom of the letter, Ethan had written a simple offer. If you truly want to understand leadership, stop trying to be above people. Learn how to stand beside them. He invited her to join one of his community businesses for 6 months. No CEO title. No executive office. No personal assistant. No luxury car waiting outside. She would work like everyone else. She would arrive early. She would serve customers. She would listen. At first, Olivia felt insulted. After everything she had achieved, after building a company worth billions, Ethan was asking her to start from the bottom. Her pride told her to refuse. Her ego told her she didn't need anyone's lesson. But something inside her had changed. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about her reputation. She was thinking about the people she had ignored. So she accepted. On her first day, Olivia walked into a small community restaurant owned by Ethan's foundation. No cameras followed her. No reporters waited outside. The employees didn't know her past. To them, she was simply another new worker. The first few days were uncomfortable. She burned food. She struggled with simple tasks. She made mistakes she never imagined someone like her could make. A young employee patiently showed her how to use the ordering system. An elderly customer thanked her for remembering his name. A cleaner smiled when Olivia helped carry supplies. Small moments. Ordinary moments. But they changed her. For years, Olivia had measured success by the size of a building, the value of a contract, and the number of people who knew her name. Now she discovered something different. A successful leader wasn't someone who made everyone afraid to disappoint them. A successful leader was someone who made everyone believe they mattered. Months passed. The woman who once walked through crowded rooms expecting people to move aside now held doors open for others. The woman who once ignored employees now asked about their families. The woman who once believed kindness was weakness discovered it was the strongest form of leadership. Then came the anniversary gala. 1 year after the night everything changed. The same Crystal Crown Gala returned. The same ballroom. The same powerful guests. But Olivia was different. She wasn't attending as CEO. She wasn't there to impress investors. She was there to support the charity that had once exposed her biggest mistake. As she helped elderly guests find their seats, a young waiter accidentally bumped into her. A glass of coffee spilled across her dress. The room went silent. Everyone remembered. Everyone waited. Would Olivia become the same person she was before? The young waiter turned pale. "I am so sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean." Olivia smiled gently. "It's okay." She picked up the fallen napkin herself. Then she helped the nervous waiter clean the mess. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said. "What matters is how we handle them." Across the ballroom, Ethan Brooks watched quietly. A small smile appeared on his face. He didn't see the arrogant CEO from a year ago. He saw someone who had finally learned the lesson he hoped she would. Later that evening, Olivia approached Ethan. "I finally understand," she said. Ethan looked at her. "Understand what?" She smiled. "That the most important people in any company aren't always the ones sitting at the biggest tables." Ethan nodded. "Now you understand leadership." Years later, people would still tell the story of the billionaire investor who disguised himself as a waiter. But the real story was never about the slap. It was never about losing a $2 billion investment. It was about a woman who discovered that power without humility creates distance. But humility can rebuild everything. Because the greatest investment Ethan Brooks ever made wasn't in a company. It was in a person who was willing to change.